Wendy's recording. Welcome, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Bardsley, sorry, online, and Councillor Baxter Payne may join us later in the meeting. He has a personal matter he's attending to at the moment. Right, so if we start with apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, one apology, and that is from Councillor Karen Ashley. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Noting that we have 9 people in the room, we are quorate, I'm pleased to say. Unfortunately, Councillor Bardsley attending online still doesn't constitute attendance at the meeting for the purposes of quoracy, which is frustrating, but it is as it is. But we are quite delighted. Thank you very much indeed to everybody for making the effort to attend today's meeting. Right, declarations of interest. Any disclosable pecuniary interest they have in any item being discussed during the course of the meeting. In addition, the receipt of any gift or hospitality should be declared where the value of the is thought to have exceeded £25 in gifts or £40 in hospitality. Anything that anybody wishes to declare.
Only a train ticket, I think.
That's probably an expense, isn't it? So, okay. Moving on to Chair's remarks. I think the first thing to say is that this is obviously the final meeting for this version of the committee, and obviously elections are due to take place, and this committee will presumably reform again in the summer. So first of all, just a word of thanks from me to all those who have participated in the discussions this year. So it's been good that we've been quorate on 4 of the 5 meetings, and I thank you all for your participation. I also, for those of you who are standing for re-election, I obviously wish you all the best. We will see in due course, obviously, who reappears as part of this committee in the summer, whether it be through election or through nomination by the relevant constituent or non-constituent members. But thank you for everybody's participation. 2 other things just to bring to your attention. I've attended the usual meetings of overview and scrutiny in the board since our last meeting, including the board meeting in which the budget was formally considered, which was referenced in our last meeting. And the final thing to say is we've had a couple of references to scrutiny protocol. Do we know who that is?
Yeah,
Councillor Bardsley. Councillor Bardsley, I think if you maybe need to turn yourself on mute.
Yep.
That's okay. We're getting a lot of feedback from you at the moment, I'm afraid.
Apologies.
All right, no problem. We referenced the proposals around scrutiny protocol. Dan Essex referenced this at the last meeting. Just to let you know, there is a first workshop scheduled for this Wednesday, where I will be attending alongside the chairs of Overview and Scrutiny and the Transport Overview and Scrutiny to discuss how that may impact on this committee going forward. You may recall there were 2 specific matters that I thought were particularly relevant to this committee. One was continuity from year to year rather than annual appointment, and the second was the suggestion of a formal report from the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, which is not something we've historically been required to do, but might be a recommendation. I will obviously feed back to ARAC in due course as to how those discussions evolved. That was it, I think, from me. Right, minutes of the meeting on the 30th of January as stepped out. If we could review those for factual accuracy before taking any comments or follow-up items. So on page 1 of the minutes, any comments, any concerns? Page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not sure. We probably don't need to confirm factual accuracy of 7. There we go. Okay, so people happy to approve those as an accurate record of the meeting? Thank you. Thank you very much. as I say, in terms of just picking up on a few of the individual points that were discussed as part of those minutes, I've already referenced under item 48, the scrutiny protocol. Under 49, we are due to receive a report on health and safety. Oh, sorry, that's a little bit later. 49, we're picking up under item 10 on the agenda. Under 50, Councillor Kay's comments around contractors. We'll be picking up as part of the discussion under health and safety. Under 5, sorry, there is one tiny factual point. Under 52, paragraph 3, the Executive Director of Finance and Business Hub.
Oh, the spelling, yes, yes.
Is noted as Linda Hub.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed I forgot totally when I read it. I laughed.
I should have highlighted. Linda Hub is Linda Horn.
Yeah.
Okay. The board did approve the budget at the
Yes.
February meeting. So just to let members of the committee know that. Statutory accounts, the report from Grant Thornton, Grant is here. I don't know where we want to pick that up in terms of the agenda, but
AOB or not?
AOB.
AOB, okay. I'm not sure we're allowed AOB, are we?
Oh, we could do it here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perhaps, maybe. We'll pick it up in a moment, if that's okay. Just get to we'll ask you to comment there. And I think that was it. Obviously, we've got an update on internal audit, which addresses the 2 other financial systems audits as well. And we've got an update on the transport review and we note the request for Grant Thornton to present their plan for the 24 audit as soon as possible. Again, Grant may comment on that at this point. So yeah, if the committee is okay, maybe we pick up on those 2 points at this point. So in terms of finalising of the external audit for 23 and plans for 24, maybe I could invite you to comment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of 22-23, we are going through the final review of our file now. I did have a meeting with Linda and Louise last week to go through that. It's with us now to finalise the final quality checks on the file from my perspective so that I can issue the opinion. And I'm hoping to do that midweek. So in terms of finalising our work, in terms of that, we're going through the final checks got just to make sure they're fully in line with our expectations, and then just tidying up other bits on the file. So I'm hopeful for midweek to finish that on Wednesday or something like that. But and had Linda, we are aware that it is the last board on Friday as well. So whilst we need to make sure that we do the proper job, I should be able to hopefully issue before board on Friday as well. Is the plan.
And can we confirm there is nothing further coming out of your work and finalising your report that this committee should be aware of in terms of the approval of the accounts?
Yeah, at this point in time, in terms of we're not sort of doing any more audit work per se. We're going through this final amendment. I think, having spoken to Helen in the morning in the office this morning, there's a couple of bits we just need some clarification around. A couple of notes have changed, not quite what we were expecting to happen. But I don't think there's anything there. I think it's just the way that the amendments have been put through. So I'm not aware at this point in time there's any significant changing in the accounts in terms of that. So that we need to bring to your attention today.
Okay.
But if there is, I will let you know as soon as. But I'm not aware of anything at the moment, having gone through that process.
Okay.
And in terms of, I suppose, just to remind members, we have already issued the annual auditor's report as well. So in terms of when we have finished that work, then I will reissue that in the sense of, but I won't be changing the value for money work in that sense. I'll be just updating it for we issued the accounts, the opinion on this date and things like that. So the two will go together and we will look to certify the audit closed.
Any questions from any members of the committee vis-a-vis closing out the 22-23 accounts? Okay, 23-24.
You may notice that I'm actually been joined by somebody else. So this is Lauren Griffiths, who will be taking over the audit from 23-24 from me. I can probably easier if I hand over to Lauren, and I can clearly speak for her, but that is not my role in that sense. And Lauren can give you an update on where we are on 23-24.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grant, and good morning, everybody. As Grant said, my name is Lauren Griffiths. I'm a director in the Birmingham office of Grant Thornton, and I am picking up the audit from Grant for the 23-24 year onwards. We're in the process of completing our planning work at the moment, and the intention is that we'll have with management for comments in the next couple of weeks. We're looking to get that kind of out this month. And then hopefully back onto a normal timetable from that point onwards. So I have previously worked on the audit of the Combined Authority before, many years ago. So I'm quite looking forward to coming back and getting back into things.
Hey, thank you and welcome. We look forward to working with you in due course. Obviously, that will be. Well, we haven't got any dates for meetings after this, have we? As of yet, obviously. So we will let you know when the next meeting of this committee is, and obviously receive your plan at that point in time. Any questions from any other members of the committee around anything to do with Grant Thornton? Okay, very good. Right, which brings us on to health and. I can do that at the end, if that's all. Yeah, that's okay. Right, 5. Oh, yes.
Just wanted to ask Grant Thornton. So I know it's currently due up to the Department of Levelling Up and Housing. Put a consultation out about perhaps introducing a backstop. In regards to that, would that affect how these accounts will be audited? Or would there be resources going forward as well? I just want to make sure.
I'll start and then Lauren. In terms of the backstop, we'll pick up sort of 22-23 accounts are going backwards, and the proposal is that would kick in September. So we would have signed before the opinion before that date. So the backstop will have no impact on the Combined Authority in terms of that. And in terms of resourcing 23-24, I'll hand over to Lauren.
Yes, so in terms of resourcing 23-24, our intention is to have the vast majority of our audits completed by the end of this calendar year, and that would include your audit, and then so that means that the backstop would continue to not have any effect on the delivery of your audit.
Thank you. Yeah, that's reassuring to know where we are up to. I was just thinking of in terms of a local authority, other organisations that you're working with. We're going to move resources to them to get theirs done before they have to start. But yeah, thank you. That's really good.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, right. If not, health and safety annual report from Ed.
Thank you, Chair. So the current financial year represents the first year of the current 3-year health and safety strategy, with a principal focus on building upon existing progress. You will note within the update, we've included a list of our achievements from the past couple of years. Really positive to see the level of progress we've made in a number of areas, ensuring that a robust framework exists for health and safety across the organisation. As part of this strategy, we've introduced a list of principles to manage, influence, collaborate, innovate and empower. And those underpin our 6 strategic priorities, which are ownership and community, holistic management, specialisms, communication, knowledge and assurance. These actual priorities represent an evolution of the priorities set in our previous strategy and ensure closer alignment to our ISO 45001 standard criteria. In terms of the wider strategy, we've made sure that it doesn't sit in isolation. We've ensured that it's aligned to various other internal and external plan strategies and standards. And in terms of the framework for delivery, we've ensured as part of the development of the strategy, we've had support and endorsement from across the organisation. We have a robust safety management system that is certified and updated as appropriate, and those governance arrangements are in place to allow us to monitor the delivery of health and safety across the organisation. In terms of wellbeing, we've obviously continued to ensure greater alignment with the health and safety and wellbeing strategies, just particularly in the area of hybrid working to ensure that we're meeting those challenges. We look to take a holistic whole person approach with physical and mental health wellbeing fully integrated into our safety management system. The next phase of that is updating our safety management system to incorporate the requirements of ISO 45003, which is a relatively new standard, but looks to incorporate the psychological health and safety risks into our arrangements. For each of the years that the strategy covers, an annual delivery plan will be produced. Beyond this year, we're looking to supplement these wider annual delivery plans with directorate-specific plans. Progress against the plans are reported quarterly to the Health and Safety Committee, the Strategic Health and Safety Committee, and the Safety, Health and Environment Committee, and also as part of the monthly reporting cycle that goes to the various boards and forums across the organisation. In terms of the matter arising around contractor management, we do have very robust arrangements in place to manage that. The period has seen the Transport TFWM Delivery Directorate stood up, which obviously oversees a lot of our programme delivery on that side of the organisation. In terms of selection of competent duty holders under CDM regulations, obviously the tender evaluation process, vetting and selection allows us to make sure the health and safety arrangements in place. And then more widely, we look to make sure that the management arrangements to plan, manage and monitor throughout the project are also there as well. So that's through the various ways in terms of pre-construction information, review of risk assessments, method statements, work packages, and also work inductions when working on our premises, permit arrangements. And also on bigger projects, we also make sure we have a construction manager in place who actually is embedded on site for those works. Obviously, key areas, competent health and safety advice, both on our side as client and within the PD and PC. And obviously, we undertake audits and inspections, both client inspections and then contractor inspections. And then finally, towards the end of the project, we also make sure that there's adequate health and safety handover arrangements for the health and safety file in place. In terms of areas of concern, there are not currently any specific areas of concerns or items for urgent improvement. We obviously continue to seek that the SMS and strategy is fully integrated in each area of the organisation, and the compliance assurance reviews, which will give us a baseline of where each directorate is at, will be a key component of that. And more widely, I will be leaving the organisation at the end of May, so I'm currently in the process of putting together a transition plan to make sure that this change is addressed as smoothly as possible. And that's everything from the health and safety update report. Any questions?
Thank you for your report. I'm obviously sorry to hear you will be leaving the authority, but I'm pleased to hear there will be an appropriate transition. Maybe first just invite Councillor Kay to comment.
Yeah, thank you. We had a audit report on health and safety at a recent meeting, and it didn't mention at all how we supervise contractors. So if, for instance, we've got a main contractor building a railway station or whatever it might happen to be, and they employ their subcontractors, that we are aware of the health and safety procedures on site and that we know that they are adequate. And I believe from what you said that is the case, but we might just clear that one. And I also wonder whether your remit includes building safety and whether you're taking account of the new regulations on building safety. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so in terms of the New Building Safety Act, none of our buildings fall into that criteria, other than the update to one of the sections which made changes to the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. So we're fully aware of those and making the changes accordingly. So that was namely that you have to have a written risk assessment, fire risk assessment, whereas previously that wasn't the case if you had less than 5 employees. And also it reinforces the requirement for competent person taking those assessments as well. So we're fully aware of those and taking those into account.
Bennett, I have 1 or 2 questions, if I may, and then I'll obviously open it up to all other members. Just to note, I suppose, the continuation of the ISO 45001 2018 certification, that is clearly important, and obviously I think it's important that we note that that continues and is valid until January 26, so reassured by that. You reference health and safety e-learning and describe it as mandatory. Could you maybe just, how do you ensure that it is undertaken?
So that's monitored on a monthly basis. So the organisation development and engagement team review progress and the number we've got outstanding. So there's 3 mandatory courses: an introduction to health and safety, fire safety awareness, display screen equipment. And we actually report as part of our monthly reporting to board the levels of completion against each of those, and now it's been split down by directorate as well, so we can focus where attention's needed if there's any particular areas where we're not seeing the compliance we'd expect.
Excellent, very good. And then just on, there's reference to audit and inspection and internal audit of health and safety. Obviously, we received this report, but can you just explain a little bit about how that reporting of that cycle of audit work is undertaken and who you report to? I think it references the Strategic Health and Safety Committee, the Safety, Health and Environmental Committee. But can you just clarify a little bit about the audit process and the reporting?
Certainly, Chair. Yes, so we have a full inspection of our premises. So that's our 12 bus stations, 45 park and ride sites. We do a compliance assurance audit of Metro as the operator, as the owner, sorry, and for these various other sites, we audit, and obviously Summer Lane as our corporate premises. So those are done against a set schedule, and report progress as part of the monthly reporting that goes in board report, and also quarterly, as you said correctly, the Strategic Health and Safety Committee and the SHE Committee. Then any actions arising from those are put onto a master action tracker, again, which we monitor for completion against those in a timely manner, and any sort of that sort of run over are then flagged at Strategic Health and Safety Committee, so we have a route for escalation if we're seeing lack of compliance with closing those actions out, which are few and far between, I'm glad to say.
Okay, thank you. And clearly there would be an opportunity to escalate to this committee if it was deemed necessary. But I noted in 5.1 you say there are not currently any specific areas of concern or particular items for urgent improvement. So I note that as part of your report. Right, open it up to any other question. Councillor Paul.
Yes, it's regarding the e-scooter health and safety. I'm very sceptical about e-scooters in general because the previous reports of having the public just to grab a e-scooter. Is there a speed limit on the e-scooters? And I believe in other areas that they have had, but it can be easily manipulated to ignore those, and they can go at 30, 40 miles an hour. And it's worries that e-scooters with the state of the roads at times that they easily can be cause serious damage through unsafe pavements and roads. Never mind barging into pedestrians, that's my only view. But are the e-scooters that you're proposing this new scheme going to be ensure that they stick with a speed limit and it can't be manipulated to by whoever to change it to a higher speed?
As far as I'm aware, that the ones under the Beryl scheme are all sort of these a top speed limit, I believe, of 30 miles an hour. And then there's certain areas that are go slow areas as well. So they're sort of done via GPS sort of markers where they shouldn't be able to go above the lower top speed. I don't believe they can be manipulated by the rider because they are fully controlled via Beryl. There may be private e-scooters, which obviously shouldn't be on the roads anyway, that are being used. Obviously, we've got no control over, but the ones that are under the scheme do operate under strict parameters.
Okay.
Further questions for Ben? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll shout. Thank you. It's just an observation, perhaps more for Helen to take note. On one of the paragraphs here, there's quite a few professional abbreviations done on it. And person like me, who is a layman, it becomes difficult to just work it out. So maybe in future reports, I'm trying to remember which paragraph. Oh, yeah, it's on health and safety training program. Number of if they can be first explained, then certainly they followed up with the rest of the information that helps to understand it, like institution of occupational safety and health and so on, that kind of stuff. That will make life easy. The other, just a little, now I've got the microphone, just making comment. I think I'll probably raise with Wendy separately. I attended the training, or tried to attend the training on the 6th of February. No, that's just last week actually, wasn't it, Wendy? That I got the ticket to attend it through the system, but I tried spending about half an hour to find the link. I still couldn't do it. In the end, I gave up. It's just a general issue. If while it's being booked, maybe good idea the link is sent with it, so that people can just click and learn how what's going on. So I missed the training, but it doesn't matter. It's not that important, but I think it's learning the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on Ben's report? Okay, if not, we will note the content and thank you for your work, Ben, and wish you all the very best for whatever the future holds for you personally. So
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all.
Right, moving on to item 6, which is the quarterly update on the Single Assurance Framework. I think that's Jyoti.
Morning. Thank you, Mark, Chair. So morning, everybody. I'm Jyoti Sharma and I am Head of Programme Assurance and Appraisal. And just drawing your attention to the Assurance Performance Report for Q3, which covers a reporting period of October to December 2023. Just summarising, the purpose of the report is detailed in section 1. So the report summarises the activity of the Programme Assurance and Appraisal team for Q3. So a reminder to members today that this is the independent out of directorate Programme Assurance reviews, which are undertaken for all major investment projects outside of the delivery directorates. The report is fairly detailed with quite a lot of analytics, but if I could draw your attention to section 7, which provides a key summary for the report. So as detailed in section 7, there was nothing particularly alarming to report to the executive or to the audit committee today for this audit period. There continues to be growth and increase in the trends of the various different assurance reviews which were undertaken in Q3. One slight anomaly may be that you may have picked up is a sharper increase in the change requests that were undertaken in this period, but the detail in the report for section 6 actually will reconfirm that not all of the change requests were driven by cost increases. It was actually quite evenly split in terms of time, scope, and also cost. And a number of the change requests which were reviewed by the team this period as well were also opportunity change requests. So actually additional funding to deliver more opportunities that were delivered in this period as well. Going down into some of the cost increase change requests, most of those are actually construction and inflation related change requests, which have been reported through the West Midlands Combined Authorities Governance previously as well. Any questions?
Hey, thank you very much indeed. I say it every time you present this, this is an important part of the assurance framework, and important that we get to receive these reports. And so thank you for the quarterly update. The only thing you addressed a couple of the questions I had already. So just a couple of things I was just going to note. One, in 5.2, it does refer to Birmingham in section 141. I presume that should be 114, just as a small techie point. Yeah. I don't know what section 141 is, so but I'm presuming it's 114. And the second thing I just wanted to note was the fact that our updated SAF has been approved by DLUC. So that's encouraging. Yes. Obviously, that came to us for endorsement. It went to the board for approval, and now the fact that it's been approved by DLUC, I'm encouraged to see. So thank you for that. Right, open it up for other questions. Councillor.
Through you, Chair, I've got 2 questions. The first is regarding the overpayment to suppliers on page 44. I believe it states that if the supplier themselves who alerted the authority about a week later following the payment, I see in the urgent actions that have been implemented, from the actions are regarding to stopping this from happening. Sorry.
Yeah, don't know whether that's a question best directed at the next session, in the next section on internal audit, rather than to Jyoti, if that's okay. Is that all right? Yeah. Unless you did have anything to comment on that, Jyoti, but I think that's probably one for the internal audit. Okay, is that okay? What was the second question? Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chair. You say that all major projects are assessed. I'm wondering where the line is drawn between the major projects and the next one down, which I would imagine would be substantial projects, and whether you think there will be value in doing more investigation on the substantial projects.
In relation to that, the single assurance framework, which was just approved by DULUC, that the chair mentioned, actually outlines the definitions in the projects, the major projects that we are accountable to actually ensure are undertaken through SAF project reviews. So that definition is captured there. So that generally is devolved investment funding to the West Midlands Combined Authority, and we're accountable to ensure that SAF is followed. So all of those projects are adhering to SAF as demonstrated in the report. In terms of any additional projects which could benefit from SAF, we also have a guide to corporate governance, which is an internal protocol that's utilised by the executive and all of enabling services. And if any other projects which are initiated are deemed to be higher risk or would benefit from having a SAF review, those are identified at those initial stages, and therefore a review is undertaken. So mostly the major projects are in relation to the major investment projects rather than corporate projects. But if there was anything in addition, then there is an opportunity to capture those as well.
Thank you. With devolution and other developments, there will presumably be quite an increase in projects to be assessed. Is your team adequately resourced to cope with the changes?
So as part of the single settlement preparation that the West Midlands Combined Authority is currently undertaking, the single assurance framework quite heavily features in terms of the control system that the organisation will have to have in place. So it's positive that DULUC approved the single assurance framework, and we'll continue to work with government in terms of the implications of single settlement as well. And all of the wider enabling services is currently, there's a separate project which has been initiated, and all of the wider enabling services are currently working through what the new operations could be and any resource implications. So yes is the answer now, but that those reviews will continue as part of the organisational planning.
Thank you. Just one final one. On the statistics given on page 22, could you tell me what a health check is and why there's so few of them?
So a programme health check is a programme review which is taking place when the project is in delivery. So the single assurance framework, we started transitioning out to all of the West Midlands Combined Authority approximately 2 years ago. And most of those reviews are take place prior to a project starting implementation. So it's in the development stage. So most of the reviews will be in the development stage. At the beginning of this year, we started to introduce the programme health checks, which would do some health checks of projects in the delivery stages. There's fewer projects in the delivery stages, and we purposely developed a programme of what those health checks could be to share with the executive. So we are in line with the programme that was shared with the executive, but the distinction is between the development and the delivery stage. These are opportunity reviews. They're not mandated by the single assurance framework. So the focus is always on the development stage where we have to adhere to the SAF.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want to comment on the resourcing point?
It was only just to assure this committee that yes, as Jyoti said, what we have as an executive team is a work plan at the minute to look at the mobilisation requirements for in anticipation of the single settlement. And how that will work. So the whole operating model, whether that's through governance or you know, all of the outlining operating model for that. So that's being worked through at the minute with the executive. That will go through leaders, and we will make sure that obviously not only the CA is resourced, but obviously it will have implications for the auditors as well about how the whole piece works. So that will be a piece of work that comes back via the board in due course on how the future operating model will work.
Okay. That's not.
Thank you for your report. It seems reasonable levels of change. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry about that. Thank you for your report. It seems that reasonable levels of change, requests and understandable reasons. And I know that the combined authority, each staff in each Walsall Council included, are involved in the investment reviews before these. So I'm content with the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Did you have it? Any other questions or comments on the Gertie's report? Thank you. Okay, so we formally note that report, and thank you again, Gertie, and look forward to obviously the report for the final quarter. Yes.
Thank you.
Completed. Okay. Thank you. Right, moving on to agenda item 7, which is internal audit, and I suppose just before. Oh, sorry, Councillor Martin. Thank you. Just before I invite Lorraine to comment on the report and the content, I should welcome Matthew, who is going to be. Have you joined yet, or are you about to join?
Yes, I'll be joining in about 7 days' time.
Okay. Would you just like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and the role you're going to be taking on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my name is Matthew, and I'll be the new Head of Internal Audit and Information Governance. It's an exciting time, I think, for internal audit and the organisation implementing a new internal audit team at a time of great change. And I think that we'll be well placed to be able to react to the new risks which will be in place for partly the single settlement and other areas as well. Karen is joining us as well as a senior auditor, or she already has joined. Sorry, she started work on Monday, and we are now putting together that team and resources so that we can meet those challenges. So thank you, and I look forward to working with some of you in the future.
Very good, and thank you. You are very welcome. Obviously, this is very much part of a transition from moving from a situation where internal audit services were provided through a outsourced relationship with Wolverhampton, City of Wolverhampton, which what existed the last few years, to bringing that resource in-house. I've got a first initial introductory meeting with Matthew at the beginning of April, I believe, in the diary, and clearly it will be important. You know, typically in the past we might have expected to see an internal audit plan for 24-25 at this meeting. Given Matthew is just joining us in a week or two's time, we look forward to receiving your proposed plan at the first meeting of ours in the new year as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Smith. I've been an internal auditor for the last 15 years, and I'm really excited to be joining the authority. I started last week, and it's been a barrage of information, but brilliant, really, really warm welcome that I've had and a brilliant introduction to the authority. So yeah, I mean, I hope I'll bring my skill set with me to support Matthew, and I'm looking forward to him starting. My history is with Birmingham City Council, and I was the principal schools lead for the Birmingham City. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Unless there's any further questions at this point, maybe I'll ask Lorraine to talk us through the report for this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully everybody's already had an opportunity to look at the report that was shared within the papers. You'll see within there, I think the key message really is that we've managed to complete 4 pieces of activity this last period since we last reported. And the TFWM review has obviously been something that's been going on for quite a while. I won't touch on that in this section because you're all aware that that's going to be covered within the private agenda later on. We have covered and completed the accounts payable, accounts receivable and the National Fraud Initiative audits. Each of those were all allocated a satisfactory audit rating. And if I can please hand over to Bami on the screen, who will just give you a little bit of background on the findings of those.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Chair. I'm Bami Cole, the audit contractor who've been here for the last 12 or so months. As Lorraine said, we have done 3 audits since the last meeting. And those 3 audits were the accounts payable, accounts receivable, and NFI. The opinions, of course, were all satisfactory. In terms of the account payable, I think that one was the only one with a red signal. And the key issue there was a breach of the scheme of delegation. I mean, we discovered that there had been cases, 2 out of 3 months tested, where the officers extended their authority to authorize payments. As a result of that, we agreed 2 recommendations, which are under the recommendations action plan section, where officers have agreed to double check before they make any payments, and also to create an automated system. Because at the moment, we think the reason for the breach was they were carrying out a manual system. And as a result of that, there was no double check taking place. So with an automated system, that would then prevent any breach of the authority automatically without having to go through another person. So on that score, we believe that the action proposed and agreed has addressed the problems which we discovered on that audit. The next audit was the accounts receivable, where there were 5 amber issues identified, and those were listed in the report. The first one being that there was no references to the value of debts that had been charged to the provisions of on the provisions for balance, and we found out that the key issue there was that there was a double check taking place. And then the other issue was lack of procedures. The key issue there was that because there was no procedures which have been agreed, there was no guidance being followed by officers. And as a result of that, that also resulted in further breaches. The third issue was lack of age debt provision balance. There was insufficient arrangement being made for age debt. And the fourth issue was no policy in place that details the option for the recovery of outstanding debt. So again, lack of policy and procedures. And also there was irregular reporting to senior management of outstanding debts. And there was inconsistent information held by the which contradicts some of the information on the Constitution and financial regulations. And the final issue was there were 4 old historical sales invoices totaling about 8.8 million, which need investigation and further validity, and whether or not those should be written off. So in all, we felt that although these issues were amber, we felt that other issues which we found complied with good practice, and as a result of that, we gave the opinion of satisfactory. But we've agreed recommendations with the relevant managers, and some of them have been implemented immediately. The final report was... Yes.
Can I just clarify one point? You just said 8.8 million. The report says 8,800.
Sorry. 8,000, 8,800. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay.
Yes, 8,800. Sorry.
My attention was.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry. The final audit was the NFI audit, and there the key issue there was lack of an NFI policy. The lack of policy again did not provide guidance for officers, and as a result of that, there was some breaches. The data matches which we undertook identified some data matches, but in terms of the materiality of it, they're not necessarily of much relevance actually, because they're only notional, especially the one on concessionary fares, which identified a total of £733,000 matches, but those are notional figures. They do not have any financial impact. Again, the key issue there was lack of policy, which resulted in the amber signal, and we agreed that policies should be implemented, and management are working on those at the moment. The other two issues were minor, actually, and we gave those two green signals. They're of minor, significance, and again, we are good recommendations for them to be implemented.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah, before we go on to questions, if we could just come back and reassure about the management response on those. I think in terms of the first AP flag, in terms of the concessionary travel payment, and where Bami is saying that I don't want everybody to feel more alarmed than they need to be, where delegations have been breached. Actually, what this essentially is we have a robust process for calculating concessionary fares payments to operators that operates on a monthly basis. We have team members that calculate the payments. We have a team member that independently checks that calculation, and then we have another finance team member that then double checks that payment and then signs off that the schedule is okay to pay. It then goes through to the manager to authorise payment. What had happened is that the values of those payments for the manager that actually authorised it, the values of those payments were not actually, they were outside of that delegation, and they would normally have had a deputy 151 or 151 authority on them as well. But in terms of the validity of the payments, they're absolutely valid. We have a triple check lock on the actual calculations before they get anywhere near anybody in terms of signing them off. What was missing was the counter signature of the deputy 151 or the 151 to actually pay, but the payments themselves were valid. So we've tightened that up. In terms of the AR report, obviously hand Louise to answer any detailed questions on this, but I think I just need to understand, because obviously from my perspective, I have a financial reporting pack every single month where I go through all of our debts outstanding and understand what our provision is and what our calculation is and what our risks are in terms of a financial control reporting pack. So I do that every month. So I will just be picking up that with Louise in terms of what gap the auditor thinks there is in that pack. And yes, I'm frustrated, long words, that we do have a policy for debt recovery. I was part of writing it myself and signed it off. We just have been unable to I didn't find it. Oh. So we will be rewriting a policy, absolutely, so that it is written down as to what we need to do in these circumstances. I suppose I am just frustrated that as a finance team we've been able to define this historic policy. It's got lost somewhere in the transition between the previous authority and the CA. And then finally, yes, on the NFI, how we do the process for checking the NFI, it needs writing down, and we've got that in hand.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on a couple of things? So So your reports do have cumulative debt. There was this point around, we seem to have details of overdue invoices rather than the cumulative amount for a particular organisation. So do you see the cumulative amount?
I don't see the cumulative amount per organisation, and we'll
Okay.
tighten that up. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Taking all that together, what is the experience of bad debts that we have as an authority? How much are we ultimately experiencing as bad debt provisions or write-offs? Just a degree of context, you know?
We're doing an exercise at the moment, so that we can kind of do that housekeeping before the year end.
Yeah.
We don't routinely write off anything at all.
Okay.
So that we'll be doing it more regularly going forward, because the types of debts that we've got are very different compared to when we were just a transport authority, if that makes sense.
Linda, sorry, you wanted to say?
So I think our history will tell us, actually, because a lot of our income comes from local authorities, so we don't tend to have a lot of bad debts in that way. In terms of income debts, probably about 60,000 provision we carry, which on a 1.2 billion pound annual budget isn't proportionately huge. We do then have a separate debt, which is an expected credit loss provision, which we run against the commercial investment scheme, and that at the minute I think is about 5 million or so, but that's compliant with the relevant financial reporting requirements, and we have had no losses against that scheme since it's been running since 2017, and I also ensure that we have first charge security on those types of debts anyway.
Final question for me now. So I didn't really understand this point around the concessionary fares and the notional saving. Just to elaborate a little bit what that actually means. What is the 23,659? What are they, and really understand what the point was that was being made here.
Chair, on that, we've obviously, I'm sorry, I haven't got the copy on the report directly on the screen. We've referred to the NFI government office. They set a notional value per concessionary pass that they've identified within the national fraud process. So I think there was 26,000 as a circa figure of potential frauds that they found within the system. When we assessed them, all of those were people who had unfortunately passed away, but the cards hadn't been cancelled out. So if those cards had continued to have been used, that notional value would have been the fraudulent amount.
Okay.
So, but those cards have now been cancelled.
Again, but you want to say something?
Yes, so just so we don't pay out concessions on the basis of cards issues, we pay out concessions on the basis of trips undertaken. But as Lorraine said, if we had continued to issue those cards and those people were unfortunately had passed away, then actually somebody else could have been using those cards. So, you know, we rely on certain processes in terms of being able to cancel those cards when people do pass away.
Okay. Thank you. Open it up for other questions, queries. Councillor.
For you, Chair, on regards to another payment, which is on page 44, I've considered the other payment to adult education provider. And it was the adult education provider themselves who alerted the authority about the other payment. I note that the actions relating to this are both concerning to preventing this from happening in the future. But mistakes do always happen, and if it were to happen in the future, or had the provider themselves, the supplier, not notified the authority, when would it have been picked up? Would it be at the end of the month, at the end of the year, or not at all? What mechanisms do we have in place should an overpayment be made to detecting them and correcting them?
If you want me to come back on
yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, so there is a monthly reconciliation process. So actually, it would have been picked up once we reconciled at the end of each month. But you know, thankfully, the supplier actually notified us before we got to the monthly reconciliation point. Yeah, and the process that the team have now put in means that will not happen again.
Okay, sorry, I was just looking at page 42, I think is where I in my pack, maybe 44 in yours, but yeah. The reference to a open in May 23, you say. Quite. Other questions on the internal audit update as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the gifts and hospitalities, I note that there are limited, only given limited assurances to high risks actions which haven't been implemented. The previous agreed date of the 23rd of December. Can I ask for assurance that these are picked up and implemented as soon as possible? Thank you.
Yes, those are continuing to be progressed. The key element of those recommendations requires the automated system to be finalised, and amendments to that before those other recommendations can be implemented, but we are continuing to progress those as quickly as we can.
Thank you. And can I also ask that we get more details within the report? I know that we haven't got any details as to the perhaps a department or.
Is that of the recommendations that are outstanding?
There was no details included in the report detailing these high risks and actions. So more details within the report.
Those reports were provided to a previous meeting.
Oh, I see.
And they are available to be seen, but I think your point around the follow we've discussed at length the importance of follow-up. And you're right. To have recommendations that are still outstanding is clearly disappointing. And do you have a sense of when those will have been addressed?
Julia, this is all with regard to getting the policy and the system. The system is almost as needs to be now, isn't it? So we should be able to
the process for declaring a gift of hospitality is happening. It's in place. It's working well at the moment. So it's just a final sign off on the policy that we need to get.
So my question was then, when will that happen?
I think we should be in time for the next meeting. I think within the next 2-3 months, they should all be completed.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Just on section 5 of your report, I say I do very much welcome this update. As Councillor Martin has highlighted, gifts and hospitality is probably the most concerning one. The other two where there's outstanding items, procurement and IR35, you do actually, and I welcome, thank you, the narrative commentary on the bottom to explain where you are with regard to those. But clearly there are also some other ones where by the time we meet next time, they will have become due. And I'm sure you'll comment on whether those have been completed or not.
I think it's just worth highlighting the recommendation that was outstanding for quite a while in relation to the cyber security audit that has now been resolved. The procurement recommendations, the team was aiming to get those completed, and I have actually messaged them whilst they've been sat here this morning to get a reply. They were aiming to get those completed by the end of last week, but unfortunately I can't confirm at this stage whether that has happened or not.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from other committee members on anything to do with this report? I just want to come on to the provisional internal audit opinion in a moment, but any other questions on any of the 3 reports you have this meeting, or the update on the outstanding recommendations? I was very interested in the NFI report. It sounds like that's quite an interesting opportunity for us to clearly identify any potential issues. So yeah, it's an interesting report to read. Thank you. So if nothing else, just on the provisional annual internal audit opinion. Oh, sorry, I'm not on the mic. Clearly, it is interim and it'll be completed in due course. Obviously, there's still quite a few audits, hopefully, to be finalised and progress before that opinion gets finally issued. but I note as of today, you are provisionally providing reasonable assurance. Okay. So
I think in terms of the audits remaining, it is good to see that we are now able to demonstrate that all of the audits that we said would be undertaken this financial year now are in progress.
and I suppose I note, you know, there are those 5 key audits around key financial systems, general ledger, payroll, treasury management, accounts payable, accounts receivable. All of those have now been completed and were either satisfactory or substantial. So, okay, thanks. Any further questions on the internal audit update from anybody? Very good. As I say, I look forward to meeting up with you, Matthew, in the next month and talking about how we take things forward, going forward. But thank you, Lorraine, and for the update. Very good. Which sort of brings us on to some extent to section 8, which is the draft annual governance statement. Which is what it is. It is clearly a draft. It reflects where we are as of today, but it refers to the statement that will go in the annual report and accounts for FY24, which obviously haven't yet ended. Julia, are you just going to comment on this?
I'll hand over to Rain, who's
okay.
the expert on this. This drafted.
Okay.
You're fighting for it now. It's now on my name.
Oh, sorry, it is now. I do apologise.
It is what it is. It's the draft for comments. This is for fund for inclusion in the 23-24 accounts. Final approval will be given as part of the process of approving the final account. Perhaps just draw the committee's attention to page 78, which picks up the 3 governance issues that were flagged last year and the response and the action that's been taken in this. I don't think there's really need for me to go into any great detail. It's up to thank Lorraine and Julia for their input, their work on this, and we've had no questions between us.
That's Kate.
Thank you, Chair. On page 72, we're told that the existing Transport Delivery Committee will evolve into a new Transport Delivery Overview and Scrutiny Board or Committee. My understanding is that overview is a management activity carried out by directors, the political leadership, and the boards which assist the management, whereas scrutiny is an entirely different activity. I would prefer the board to be named the Transport Scrutiny Committee, so that there is no doubt as to what the task of that committee is.
I think the statutory provision is that everything we think of as scrutiny committees are actually overview and scrutiny committees, an element of both. Scrutiny is clearly a very specific function, but those committees are also tasked with a general overview. So, for example, if I may do very often ask for reports providing updates on certain things or information about certain things, as far as I'm concerned, that is overview. It is not detailed scrutiny, and those committees are actually carrying out both overview and scrutiny functions, and the description is correct and in accordance with legislation.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. On page 76, where you're told that there are appropriate controls in place for arm's length appropriate controls in place for arm's length companies, and as good practice, external auditors have been appointed for West Midlands Rail, etc. I understand that the assurance on the activities of the arm's length companies does fall within the remit of this committee, and if that is the case, then it's perhaps something we need to be considering in more detail as to what the audit assurance is on the independent companies. And a further observation on page 81, the ARAC members are to consider the introduction of annual self-assessments to determine the committee's effectiveness, to identify any skills or knowledge gaps within the membership of this committee, and its engagement with officers and the board. I think we'll be discussing that further in our terms of reference, but I just wanted to point that one out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I had a similar question around the sort of the governance and oversight of our group companies. So largely it's been picked up by Councillor Kay. I was just conscious it's our first governance statement after full LEP integration. I know some bits came across last year, but it's I know the GBS LEP's only just formally shut down. So just curious, any reflections on how that has affected the process, any benchmarking we've done or liaison we've done with other authorities about how we manage that, because I know they're getting folded into all combined authorities, but ours is one of the more complex ones, of course, because we've got 3 LEPs sort of folding in. So just curious, just interested in any reflections around that this year.
Who would like to pick up that? Obviously, there's reference to this on page 70, isn't it?
Yeah, I can pick up one perhaps element of it, which is the business and the private sector representation on our board. So there is quite a big bit of work done on how we're going to go out and recruit the right board members, private, public sector to sit on our board. So that is ongoing at the moment. So there's a really big bit of work going through at the moment on that. So we'd hope by June to at least be able to start that process of recruitment and make sure that we are getting the right people around the right boards from the business sector.
Lisa.
Thank you. It's just around page 69. It includes the Marches left as part of as a member, but when I cross-reference that with the website, they no longer appear in the DBS left that's been continuing to support until March 24. Should that be GBS left?
Page 69.
Yeah. The 4 observers, the authority. Still says the Marches.
The Marches, I think, he's still an observer. It's still in existence.
It doesn't reflect that on the website.
Oh, okay, I'll check that. I'll take that away, Chair. That's okay.
Yeah, just to mention that, because it's that we are not talking about names here. When it says overall governance, I think Bridget is quite right on this issue. Yes, that's my understanding. There's no names that need to have at this stage. The process should be in place, as it's mentioned on page 69. The process should be there so that governance, overall governance, comes there somewhere to be mindful of everything what's going on, so that information can come back wherever it need to be, including here.
Thank you. Obviously, on the on-sector companies, we're about to get onto that topic in a moment in terms of another item on the agenda. But I say this is very much a draft of a statement. It will evolve. Very much welcome input from members of the committee now, and obviously in due course as this gets finalised over the course of the next few months, hopefully.
Just to come back on a couple of points, Chair. Obviously, we have a separate paper on companies. Linda could probably deal in more detail with the role of this committee if the accounts are consolidated. Clearly, this committee would have a role in agreeing accounts overall. When if they're consolidated, then it will be an element of that. But there are arrangements in place with around 5 functions of the companies, as we used to in the next report, as to someone their own audit committee, if they have their own audit and so on. So they don't necessarily need to be under the remit of this committee. Perhaps in that short details, just in terms of reviewing the accounts. The other point around training, I think it's something we need to take into the new municipal year. When we know the members of that committee are going to be going forward, I think it would be really useful. I'm sure the team already has started this work to look at what training will generally do, whether it needs to be enhanced, and whether there are any particular things that the new committee membership would particularly like to see.
Yeah, no, I very much welcome that, and that paragraph in there, I'm very supportive of, because I do think it's important for us to feel comfortable, confident in carrying out our responsibilities, that we feel we have that. Obviously, the Treasury training we had at the last meeting was an example of the sort of things that should be put in place. But initial induction training is really important to provide some of that information, but also to identify if there are further needs that are required. So, I think that is also part of the DLUC scrutiny protocol, isn't it? Is it one of the recommendations coming out of that? So I'll pick it up at the workshop that I got on Wednesday as well. Other questions or comments? As I say, please feed through comments to Helen, team on anything in this statement. But I say this will clearly come back to future ARAC meetings as we get through to the end of the year, and obviously any events that take place after the end of the financial year, but before this statement is signed off, it clearly also needs to be picked up. Any, Councillor Kay?
Just one follow-up. It's mentioned that there are audit committees of some of these companies. I just wonder whether we ought to have a formal annual letter, perhaps from the chairman of those committees to our chairman, a letter of assurance, just as a brief summary as to the activities of the committee.
Do we pick that up in the next section? Because yeah, it's an interesting point, because we previously had Midland Metro auditors report into this committee, but then we concluded we didn't need to do that, didn't we, last year? So
We did, and Midland Metro committee do now have its own audit committee, so that's why we don't need to do it. And obviously the assurance comes via, they have, each of these companies has their own audit committees, their own set of external auditors that then sign off their accounts to their company boards, and three of these will then be consolidated into our accounts, but they don't actually have a material impact on the overall accounts of the authority anyway.
Sorry, you just touched on a question I was just going to ask on the next section, which I couldn't remember which were the three that are consolidated, and I was also just going to clarify with Grant Thornton, because to the extent to which you engage with the external auditors of any of these subsidiaries, but do you want to just confirm that the ones which are consolidated?
Yeah, sorry, it is only two. I've just checked for these.
So
it's Midland Metro Limited and WM5G Limited.
Okay.
But I think Grant and I have had this conversation before about actually whether or not we even need to consolidate those two, given the materiality against the rest of the accounts, but we continue to do so.
Okay. Yeah, so Chair, just picking up on that, I'm glad I didn't said two, because I think we've only looked at two. In terms of the consolidation, yeah, we do send group instructions out to both MML and to WM5G, and we undertake work in relation to those risks at those bodies that we feel are linked into our risk at the authority. So those two, we do the group instructions, we do review as necessary their audit files, so we gain assurance from the audit work undertaken by both of those auditors on those as part of our group work in terms of the authority. And then picking up what Linda was alluding to at the end is, as the authority has grown, the way we look at that, whether they are significant components, etc., to as auditors, as you've grown, they become smaller, and therefore, whether you need to consolidate them, it becomes well, you have to keep a view on it, because MML's always been, but WM5G is right on the edge of whether you needed to consolidate or not. Although, if the investment then goes ahead in WM5G, then potentially it tips it over the edge again. So you don't want to be sort of jumping in and jumping out of consolidation. So we do keep that under review. And then I'll have to pass over to Lauren, because when she looks at the group boundary for 23-24, that'll be part of those considerations.
Yeah, and I recall in your audit plan, you have referenced the fact that those are the two audits that you have considered, and therefore, to some extent, there is feedback to this committee through that process, but not directly, which I think is where Councillor Cave is coming. I think the other point we should just reflect on is that is with regard to materiality and with regard to the annual report and accounts. Is there anything further that we should be reflecting on in terms of just broader governance and risk management? Beyond the financial accounting aspect of our responsibilities in terms of other risk management and assurance. Is there anything else we should be reflecting on? Well, that's an open question at the moment, but probably the first starting point on that is understanding what these companies are, and what they do, and what process, what areas of activity they have, which is where we're just about to go, I believe, in terms of the next item on the agenda. So, any further questions on this specific point now in terms of the annual governance statement itself? Any other comments people want to make? I'd say please very much welcome your input, and please feed that through to the team. I say at the moment, we clearly can't approve it at the moment, so it's just for noting at this moment in time, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Should we get on to the item 9 on the agenda, then the arms length companies overview? So again, this is a follow-up to a previous discussion we had. Thank you for the much more comprehensive list of the companies. But again, this is, I'll get it right. So this is under your name, Helen. So if you want to introduce this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is a follow-up from a previous report where committee had a little bit more detail about some of the companies. I think it's probably worth noting that we set up companies by exception. We set them up when we need to carry out a function that is not within the combined authority powers, and they have to be done through a company. So the list is as small as it needs to be. We don't set them up just for the fun of it. A lot of them are historic. They'll predate my arrival. I think most of them do, all of them. We've tried to give you in here an overview of them in a little bit more detail than previously, but not going into huge amounts of detail about what all of them do. As we've said, they all have their own separate arrangements for audit and actually functioning as companies. The companies vary in type in the sense that some of them are operational units with their own employees and so on, as well as others that basically just a vehicle without employees that are needed to carry out activities that we can't carry out without having a limited company. I'm not sure whether we have still got the level of detail that you want. I'm happy to take any feedback on that, but I don't actually think this committee needs to concern itself in huge detail about the operation of the companies. I think the role is more one of, are you content that as officers we have appropriate oversight through shareholder agreements, through regular meetings, through feedback from the companies to make sure that any potential risk to the authority as a whole is managed. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, that's okay.
I was curious why some of the companies are limited by guarantee, whereas others have a shareholding.
I wasn't here when they were set up, so I don't know the detail. Those things are always considered. Linda was here, so she will be able to assist. But my experience is that you would choose the appropriate vehicle at the time you considered setting up a company. Linda.
So just so I don't know on each individual case, but just to reassure this committee, when every single company has been set up, we have taken appropriate legal advice as to what is the best vehicle to set up that company under for the ambition of what the company needs to do. So all of them would have been independently, externally advised to us as to how that company will be set up in the best vehicle for what it needs to actually deliver as a company. I mean, we can go back, but I don't know off the top of my head the rationale for each of them as we speak now, because a lot of them have been set up for a long while.
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking about the implications regarding ownership and governance, because obviously if there are no shareholders, then the ownership of the company is really down to what the members are permitted to do. So I'm just flagging that as a possible area that we might need to look into. Thank you.
Councillor Jones and then Councillor Martin. Councillor Jones first.
Thank you. So in terms of governance arrangements, lots of these are really tight boards. 2 of them have boards of about 20 odd people. Quite an unwieldy thing. I appreciate there's lots of different stakeholders to take into account here, but it's quite an unusual structure for a company board. In terms of the oversight the CA has, so most councils would have a shareholder committee or a group company governance committee that oversees that portfolio of group companies. You've mentioned officers sort of have oversight of it. I just want to be reassured as to where those concerns about companies are getting reported. So are we monitoring them to make sure that they're, you know, not going to go under and fall back on the local authority, sorry, on the CA rather? What is that governance process? Where are those concerns getting flagged in terms of liabilities? And then I was just curious, might be one for Grant really, about the materiality for the accounts, because what I'm used to is significantly smaller companies and some of these being lumped into accounts of materiality, and I was curious as to what the sort of cut-off threshold was from your point of view for the CA. The right person to be asking.
I'm probably the right person to be asking, but I might need to come back to you on the exact number. I mean, it basically it is a percentage of whether that's a significant component, and I think it's now 15% of the value of the company will need to be tracked from the way we would consider it to be significant. In terms of, I just need to check that because I know the guidance has changed slightly, but to a certain extent it's mathematical. I'll be honest, it's sort of like what percentage of our is a company of the combined authority. So it's mathematical. I'll come back. I can give you some details on how we do that, but it's not. I suppose it's mainly quantitative rather than qualitative. There are some qualitative aspects of that in terms of that, but I can come back and just let you give some feedback on how we do the rough calculation on whether we consider it to be material. But it's broadly, you know, expenditure of the company versus expenditure of the command authority. And if it's over 15% or something like that, then we would consider it to be a significant component. But I can come back to you with a bit more detail on the way approach around that one.
Obviously, it also will presumably also depend on the nature of the investment. So, you know, for example, West Midlands Growth is only 5% investment for combined authority, not 100% subsidiary. So. Yeah, it would depend upon, so I say, what comes in and out of the authority's accounts in that in terms of what are you consolidating. So it's not, it will be factored in along those lines around what do you actually put into your accounts, and it comes back into the structure around, is it a joint venture? What is it? Is it? Yeah, exactly. Elements like that around how we would calculate that. But I'll try and summarise that and come back to you on that one exactly how we got to that conclusion at the moment. I think there are a couple of dormant companies as well still that haven't been used a long time now as well. So. I don't think I need to declare this. I was a director of West Midlands Growth Company for 9-10 years, but that ended a few years before. Obviously, I took on this role, but it is a company obviously I'm very familiar with and understand why there were 20 shareholders.
Yeah. So if I just come back to the 2, I think you're referring to, Councillor Jones, are obviously the 2 where there is political representation on them, which is the West Midlands Growth Company and the West Midlands Rail Executive, which obviously for reasons of them being regional have required representation from the whole region on the company boards, which is why they are the size they are. You can see obviously the ones that are officer based don't have that level of requirement to have directors or shareholders on there, as long as we have an interest in that company. So that's the rationale for why those 2 themselves are as large as they are, given the regional interest in them. And they're not actually 2 that we I think they're both associates, or one of them has an investment. They're not actually subsidiaries of the combined authority. As a legal entity, they are more regional bodies that we then have to note as either investments or associates. So that's in terms of the reporting. So the individual companies, the link through is via our shareholders rep. So you'll see I am actually a director on a couple of these companies. So actually the link through there is via me in terms of the financial issues that the company, so the responsibility sits with the director that's on the company in terms of reporting that through from a financial perspective. And then in terms of company performance, that reports through to the relevant part of the combined authority in association with its function. So the Midland Metro Limited company reports its performance through into the transport team that then feeds up into the executive. The West Midlands Rail executive does the same. The West Midlands Development Capital company's performance actually gets visibility through not only through me into the executive, but also it goes through to the authority's investment board in terms of the performance on the funds that manages. So functionally they feed up to where they are most appropriate to, and then the directors obviously have responsibility to ensure that they report back in should there be any issues.
That's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Will you be taking note, and I can't remember whether it's SITFA guidelines or LGA guidelines, but probably both, that there should not be political involvement in the directorships of these companies because of potential conflicts of interest?
I think we need to take that away. You know, these companies have been set up and the region has wanted its political representation on those boards. I think we need to take that away and come back. These companies wouldn't have been set up in this way if there was a restriction. We looked at them. We were legally advised at the time that they could be set up in this way. If you are challenging that you think they shouldn't have been, then we will need to take that away and look at it.
I just feel that it would be easier to challenge the activities of the companies and scrutinise them if there wasn't political involvement at board level.
Okay, we'll take that away and come back. Right.
Can I just comment on that? I think
Yeah.
the guidance, I think it is both LGA and SITFA. It's good practice, but it tends to refer more to companies that are owned by individual authorities and having, for example, their leader or deputy leader sitting on the board, and is there's a sufficient conflict there between the operation of the company and so on. I think with these regional, take for example the growth company, it is made up of a lot of different interested parties with political representation on the board. Personally, I think there's less chance of conflict of interest given that it's not just one authority and one company. And as Linda said, unpicking the history of that, I almost wonder whether people would agree to the growth company existing if we insisted on all the politicians stepping down from it. So it's something we can consider, but it's something I'm alive to, and Linda's definitely alive to, but whether we can unpick some of the bigger ones is a question to be asked.
I think it's a really good point. Thank you for raising it and useful to reflect on. Councillor Martin and Councillor Lack.
Thank you. Good to see this, and just to flag up, there's currently a liquidity issue around Black Country Innovation Limited in one of the reports. This could have an impact on the very light rail scheme. Just wanted to see that there's due diligence before the agreement.
Sorry,
Is that
Councillor Martin. No, can we pick that up in the private session? Is that okay?
Well, if you like, yes.
Yeah.
And thank you again for your report. Thank you.
Councillor Lack.
Thank you, Chair. Just I'm sorry. Yeah, that's all right. Thanks, Chair. I think this is the issue is how these companies, Helen has already explained. They would never have been set up on the first place if the politicians didn't agree to on the first place. That's the reason those authorities, they can monitor the progress as they go. If you take them away, who's there to monitor from their place? Who's going to put the money into it, or if there's a need or sources? It's right that they are there. We can always talk about non-political and everything else. The reality is all these things, even combined authority itself, all political. So what would you do with it? Do away with it? No. Everything, let's draw some line. These things are just pushing everything away from the elected members. It's not very helpful to anybody. Elected members need to be involved somewhere. So because the elected member like me and Councillor Martin and colleagues others, they are the one who are responsible to the public. Privates are not. So the managing of these things has to be done that way, that is transparent. People like me can be held to account what we are doing there. Other people can't be. So that's why it's necessary for us. I'll argue that, yes, there's a conflict of interest issue. There are mechanisms in place, how those can be addressed. I think that's not a bigger issue. I haven't seen any councillor quote into this position that's combined authority who must have misused the position. So it is a hair raising unnecessarily. So I think I agree with that. There are things which can be monitored in these companies. How the of the who sits on it, who's the right person to be on there at the same time, who are stakeholders and so on. So I wouldn't make much of this unnecessary position that the councillors or elected members shouldn't be there. I think I'm contented what is done. So its issue is how we review it in future and what is more beneficial to the region and the local authorities they represent. Thank you, Chair. I just want to take this off my chest. Yeah.
I think you've done that. Thank you. Yeah, it's not a straightforward area to me. It does feel like we should be aware of guidance, but we should be aware of the realities of the organisation, and we should be comfortable that appropriate checks and balances are in place to be able to manage the situation. I also very much welcome this. Thank you. In terms of progress in the last 6 months on this area, it's been huge. There is a bit of inconsistency still between on the disclosure. So, for example, it doesn't actually tell us that there are external auditors of West Midlands WM5G, I don't think. And so just if we can make sure it is as consistent and comprehensive as possible, so we do know. I also think it'd be really helpful to make sure we do know the percentage shareholding interest we've got in this paper. I think it's in, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So it says, sometimes it says 100%, then it says owned by and 7 other. So it doesn't always clarify exactly what the percentage interest is. So just a degree of consistency around those are 2 specific points. Is there an external auditor or not? And but yeah, I say overall, I very much welcome this paper, and I think it's moved our understanding on a long way. And as I said right at the beginning of this session, before we can conclude on whether we're happy around the governance and arrangements around these organisations and whether or not it's material or not, and whether or not we need to get involved or not, we just need to have an understanding of what they are. And this paper has massively enhanced our understanding. Yeah, of course.
Just on this issue, I think I agree with you completely. This is a right step that is coming here. The only issue which may well be for us to understand how the audits of these committees are done, or those companies are done, and how we get the information back from those audits. So maybe not necessarily chairperson writing to you as a chair, perhaps somebody can consolidate that kind of information. An officer can bring it to us as a brief report. This is happening or something. All we need to make sure that everything is in order. That's all we need to know. We don't need to going deep into details. I think that's my thinking.
Thank you. Very good. Linda, do you want to say anything further?
No, I just wanted to say, I mean, I can take that action away about how do we give that annual assurance.
Yeah.
To you. Yeah. We should only need to be brief, because hopefully what this report has shown you is that actually we're not out to control. There are not, there are not 100 odd companies here that we are operating below the radar. That are transacting business or inferring risk or liability into the combined authority in any way, shape or form. They are a handful of companies that for various reasons need to be operating at arm's length, as Helen said, mainly because actually we can't actually directly do that ourselves. And that they are monitored, and you have now assurance and visibility of what they are. So hopefully that should have reassured you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this particular item on the agenda? Okay, very good. Right, final item, and before we go into private session, item 10, which is the ARAC term of reference. This is a follow-up to a discussion that we had at the last meeting around the responsibilities of ARAC in particular, and authority that had been delegated to ARAC historically. I think it's actually got Julia's name against it, so that's okay. But I think it's quite important just to set the context here. So set the context of what are the regulations that are relevant here, and what is the position we actually are in as of today, and therefore what are the potential changes or otherwise that we would have to consider, if that's okay. And then I know Councillor Kay obviously wants to comment on this particular point in detail. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So before you've got a set of terms of reference for the Audit and Risk and Assurance Committee that this committee actually considered around about this time last year, when we made a commitment to come back on an annual basis to have a look at the terms of reference. The only difference in the terms of reference you have before you today is to correct a mistake, an omission that was not in the terms of reference that the board saw, and that was in relation to the delegation of the signing off of the statement of accounts. In your packs, I've included a report that went to combined authority board in 2017, when the board agreed to delegate the final version of signing off of those accounts to the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee. That was done under the Audit Regs 2015, which say that the final version of these accounts must be considered either by members of the authority meeting as a whole, or alternatively by a committee of the authority, which in this case is deemed to be the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee. So that delegation stands today. That delegation is in place. This committee has that delegated authority to sign off those accounts. I don't know if there's a huge amount else to say on that, other than they are before you, open for discussion now. The terms of reference are also open for discussion. We are a committee of the Combined Authority Board, so any kind of amendments to the terms of reference that are considered here today will need to go to board to be agreed. So board is the ultimate overseer of our terms of reference. Board appoints to this committee. So again, in our June AGM, the Combined Authority Board will be appointing members to this committee. So it is our parent committee in that respect. So before you, you have the updated terms of reference, which are the same as you had last year, just correcting that one omission, which was the signing off of the accounts, which was delegated by Combined Authority Board in 2017. I'm also requesting today that we reconsider again. We looked at it last year, but we didn't come to a conclusion on that. The inclusion of a second independent person on the CA board, which I think is in line with the CIPA guidance. What did I say? Combined Authority Board. I think the CIPA guidance suggests that we should have two independent persons on the board. We just have one independent.
Yeah, and that was noted by Grant Thornton in their recent report to us as. Okay, so hopefully that does set the context of where we are, and that is the process that has been followed within this committee since 2017. Obviously, none of us were there in 2017. I did go back and check who was on the committee in 2017. None of the people here were there, but that is undoubtedly what was minuted and has been followed ever since. So, Councillor Kay, maybe I invite you to make your observations.
Thank you, Chair. I've dug out really relevant legislation, and under section 9 of the Act, paragraph 2 says, subject to paragraph 3, a category 1 authority, which is us, must, following the conclusion of the period for the exercise of public rights in Regulation 14 and under the order, and in the following order, the authority must consider, either by way of a committee or by the members meeting as a whole, the statement of accounts, and approve the statement of accounts by resolution of that committee or meeting. And that they must ensure that the statement of accounts is signed and dated by the person presiding at the committee or meeting at which the approval is given. I think there are a number of points here. First of all, it is the authority which must sign, and I don't recognise that this committee can consider itself to be the West Midlands Combined Authority. The authority is the members of the authority. In other words, the elected members who sit and preside over it. Secondly, the wording by way of a committee or by the members meeting as a whole. Meeting as a whole infers that the committee would be a subset of the members, so that it should in fact read in full that by way of a committee of the members or by the members meeting as a whole would be the natural interpretation of that wording. And my third point is that the statement of accounts should be signed and dated by the person presiding at the committee. Now, I don't envisage it would be Mark's duty to sign the accounts. So that would mean that we would need at least a member to preside over this committee, which, as this committee is supposed to be separate and independent, I very much challenge the idea that we would have a member presiding over it. Thank you.
Yes, I'll invite Helen as our monitoring officer to respond if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's an interesting interpretation, Councillor. The legislation is pretty straightforward. It's either by way of a committee or the members meeting as a whole. This is a committee of the West Midlands Combined Authority. The committee as a whole gives its resolution and then it is signed by the person presiding. Clearly, you, Chair, preside over the meeting. You do not have a vote. So the vote comes from the members. If the members resolve to approve, then it is signed by you rather than sending it around and have everybody's signature on the end of it, signed by you on behalf of the committee. I am confident and comfortable with the arrangements that we have in place, that we've had in place for many years, acceptable to our auditors. I think it's similar, if not same, approach taken by the majority of our constituents and indeed by most other local authorities. So I take the point, but I disagree with your interpretation, Council. I'm comfortable that this committee does have the power to accept that delegation from board, which has been properly given.
Yeah, I fundamentally disagree with that interpretation. This is the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. Our job is to give assurance. It is not to authorise accounts. And I feel that we should have proper legal advice on this issue if we can't agree it.
I think the advice from the monitoring officer is legal advice, but I'll let her comment on that. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I am content with the legal advice given by Helen, because this is the way many things. The only thing which is was missing at this, which is now put in the action in red colors in our report on 104, page 104. I think the previous experience, some of us remember, perhaps Linda can verify more. In the past, sometimes we didn't have the quorum here to approve those accounts. Then it went back with the endorsement that because we were not in quorum, so the board can do it on our behalf. It worked well, though it wasn't. We were frustrated that why we are not getting quorum. I'm thankful, Chair, your push to make it happen now, and it's happening. I think this is the best. I think we can do whatever you do. Sometimes there's a little nitpicking thing. I usually give the example, or I'd rather not give examples on the legal advice. I think I am contented with the legal advice given by Helen as a monitoring officer. I'm rather happy to go with this recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda, did you want to comment at all? No? Okay, thank you. So I think, Councillor Kate, and please correct me if I'm getting this wrong, there are two concerns you have. One is it appropriate for a delegation to be given to a committee? And you've heard the advice from the monitoring officer that she believes it is appropriate for it to be delegated to a committee. The second point you have is whether this is the appropriate committee to whom it could be delegated. Is that a fair summary?
I'm saying that the committee, saying that the alternative is a meeting of the members as a whole means that the committee would be a committee formed of the members in part. So I think that the natural wording of that paragraph means that it should be a committee of the members. And I think that is the intention of the legislation.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, firstly, I note, thank you, councillor, that you don't think my advice is proper legal advice, but I would also point out that this was 2017. It wasn't my advice that the delegation was set up on, so clearly my predecessors thought that this is appropriate as well. The legislation clearly says a committee of the board. This is a committee of the board. I don't intend to get into an argument with you, councillor, about what the legislation was intended. I think it's clear on its wording, and I am satisfied that this is a committee. In fact, it's a committee that we are required to have by legislation, so it cannot be anything other than a committee of the board. And the delegation has been given. It's been in place for some 6-7 years. I don't see any reason, unless you had some evidence to the contrary or some legal advice to the contrary, why we would overturn it now.
My main concern is that this committee should be independent. And if we are content that an independent committee can sign the accounts, then perhaps we could invite the local roundtable committee to sign it. I just feel that this is not the intention of the legislation, and that the members sign. This is not a trivial signature. The signatures are there that the political leadership should take responsibility for these accounts, and I think it is fundamentally wrong that the members should seek to devolve that responsibility. The buck should stop with the political leadership, and I just do not accept that they can do anything different than to sign the report themselves.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of quick observations. The references to the members. My understanding is that the members of the West Midlands Combined Authority are obviously the 7 constituent members, all of whom are represented here, and the non-constituent members, of whom there are 3 current representatives, and the LEP, of which there is currently a representative. And the only person who is on this committee that is not therefore derived from the members is me, and I'm non-voting. So I am struggling a little bit to see that this isn't effectively derived from the members, which is what the legislation says, as you've kindly read out to us. The second observation would be that my understanding is that in respect of all 7 of the constituent members, they have delegated to a committee. Yes. In 6 of the 7 cases, that delegation has been to their equivalent of an audit committee. And therefore, what appears to be the current practice of this organisation, the Combined Authority, appears consistent with the practice of 6 of the 7 constituent members. I haven't looked at all of the non-constituent members, to be fair, but it does appear to be consistent with that. So I understand the point you're making, but it is clearly for this committee and this board to decide on its own policies and procedures, as it is every individual local authority has the ability to decide on how it should implement this regulation. I merely offer up the fact that what has been done here historically and is proposed to continue to be done is consistent with the approach that seems to be adopted by 6 of the 7 constituent members.
Yeah, on the 16th of May last year, I was appointed by full council at Solihull to be a member of this committee. I was not at that stage appointed to be a member of the Combined Authority. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Because I think we will need to obviously formally put this to a vote of the voting members of this committee as to whether they're, I think that's, well, I need your advice really as to what it is we're being asked to do as a committee, because it's to note at the moment the additional addition to the terms of reference. So can you just clarify what this committee is being asked to do at this particular point in time?
I think at the minute that delegation exists.
It does.
So it is to note that delegation is in place for this committee to have, and has been using it for the past, as you say, many years, since 2017. So I think if the committee decided, and Helen will jump in if I'm going off on a legal track now, that it didn't want to use that, then it would be a change to terms of reference. We'd have to take a report back to board. Board would have to agree to change those terms of reference. So at the minute that delegation exists, so we can't decide to undelegate it. A report would have to go back to board to change the constitution, in fact, which is a unanimous decision of the board.
Helen.
Yeah, and Linda might want to comment on this as well. That was the advice given at the time. No reason why we couldn't take it away from this committee if the committee didn't feel confident exercising that delegation, but I do question how much respect there would be for an audit committee that didn't feel comfortable approving the accounts when that is part of its main duty for existing.
Again, it is not our duty to approve the accounts. Our duty is to provide assurance on the accounts, and that includes the option of not being able to give assurance on the accounts were we not to be happy with them. Approval is a binary decision, whereas assurance is an analog decision.
Okay.
So I think what we are saying though is in 2017, this committee was delegated the duty to approve the accounts. If this committee feels it does not want to take that duty or then as officers we can take that back to the board, and we can change the constitution that says you just assure the accounts, and I will take, once you've assured the accounts, I can take them to board for final approval. It's not particularly an issue for me. I think the board itself in 2017 felt this was the right place, in accordance with what 6 of the other 7 Mets do, was to approve the duty to delegate the duty to approve the accounts here. But it's entirely within your gift to be able to decide if you just want to assure them and to give that duty back to the CA board. Then we can revert back to the pre-2017 regulation.
Sorry, I don't even know what the pre-2017 regulation is. Sorry.
Well, the position 2000 pre-2000 was that this committee would assure, and it's actually the board, the main board would approve the accounts.
Did that ever exist in the combined authority?
We did. So the first year we will have. I think the first year the main board approved the accounts. Yeah.
Just to jump in, Chair, that would be a change to the constitution, so it would require unanimous consent of board members at the CA board.
To what? Sorry, to remove the delegation.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing, I don't understand what assure the accounts means. I'm sorry, I don't recognise that as a concept. I don't know what assuring the accounts means. But that's something else we'd have to come back to if we decided that we did not wish to accept the delegated responsibility to approve the accounts. Okay, so sorry, can you advise therefore as to what we should do at this meeting? Councillor Kay has eloquently described his concerns about the delegation that has been given to this committee and exercised by this committee. There isn't actually a formal proposal that we reject I think we cannot refuse. We cannot undo that delegation. We can only refuse to act on it, I think is probably, but that isn't what's being recommended, or maybe that is what Councillor Kay would like to recommend as a proposal. I don't know.
I certainly legally challenge our authority to sign these accounts. I think the intention and in fact the wording of the legislation is that the authority should sign the accounts, and we are not the authority. I'm certainly not here by delegation of Solihull to act as the combined authority. I've been appointed to the audit committee only.
Okay, but I understand your observation. I think we've had advice from the monitoring officer that in her view it is appropriate for a delegation to a committee. This is a committee of the members in accordance with that legislation. So that's the guidance we've received legally. I'm sorry.
Can I, Chair, just the other point, which I'm not going to miss in it.
Yeah.
In 1 minute, rather, then I'll come back to this again. And the other point is here that there should be a second independent member.
Yes.
And there is also in the report, the very wording is to consider the combined authorities arrangements to secure value for money. And my thinking is if you put extra on it, I don't see any value in it. When we've got all the independent chair and we've got a independent auditor there, external auditor, I don't see anybody else that the officers have to go through and fish out another person and then see how we can manage. I think that there is no need, but it's there, it's available if we need to. But on the other part, which we are talking, let's go formal on this. I'm proposing that we accept the amendment which is done here, formally accepted. If anybody wants to vote against it, that's a problem.
Sorry.
No, and it might be one for Helen, I think. So Councillor Kay's point here is actually that you feel that you're acting on behalf of Solihull in this committee. Now, I think we just need to be clear from Helen's perspective. She's been appointed to this committee, and this is a committee of the WMCA.
Yeah,
So
no,
your role in that committee at this point, I think, is the crux of it as to whether or not you are acting as WMCA in this committee or whether you are acting solely for your Metropolitan Authority.
We are a committee attached to the authority, but whether we are of it is a different matter. I suggest that we're supposed to be independent of the authority.
We are clearly a committee of the CA board. All members appointed to this committee are appointed to the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee of the CA board. That committee has been given a delegation by the main board. It is therefore entitled to exercise that delegation of a power that sits with the board that has been delegated to this board.
I'm really conscious we're going to lose one or two members and we'd be in quorum. So could I just, is it appropriate for, the Vice Chair has suggested that this committee consider
formally
accepting
yes,
the
members have a right to vote on it, yes.
Which sets that out, and I think we've had that seconded. So is that something we are permitted to do? Okay, so there is a proposal here that we accept the proposed change to our terms of reference, which references the previously delegated authority. And therefore I probably need to ask members to vote on that. I'll say as the independent chair, I'm not in a position to vote on that. So
I'm happy.
I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm against.
You're against? That's fine. Thank you. Okay. Those are all the members who are in the room. Unfortunately, Councillor Barsley is not able to. But we register your comment and your vote against, Councillor Kay, and thank you for bringing the point to our attention. Okay. We also note Councillor Lacker's comments around the independent persons. It is merely to consider. I don't think we're doing anything more than considering at this stage. We're not proposing it. And I think that's another matter for the AWAC going forward. But it is a point that was raised by Grant Thornton previously. Any other comments on this part of the agenda?
Are we now going to consider the other aspects of the terms of reference?
Well, we weren't. There wasn't anything that was proposed to be changed. So if you wanted to propose any other changes to the terms of reference.
Yes, thank you. The governance report mentions training of the audit committee members, which I feel should be in the terms of reference.
Okay.
So that there is, I know that the mayor calls us to an initial meeting in the year, but I feel something more than that is required. The other issue is that the SIPFA guidelines recommend that this committee should have a private meeting with the head of audit without officers present, and a similar but separate meeting with the external audit staff. And I would suggest that both of those things should be included in our terms of reference, and that we should reserve places in the work plan for such meetings at appropriate times of the year when such a meeting might be fruitful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I support those suggestions, and I think we picked that up in the terms of reference in the new year. But I support both of those observations. Thank you. Apologies, I'm very conscious of time. At this point in time, we just passed the resolution to, in accordance with section 100A for the Local Government Act 1992, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business as they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information related to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding the information. So at that point in time, that's okay. Which brings us on to Helen, just the